I want to be in the better world our hearts know is possible. Charles Eisenstein sort of like gave it the best name that we have yet. The new earth, I'm definitely in the new earth school of thought. I know not everybody is, but it sustains me. It helps me make sense of what's happening. It gives me something to shoot for. It lifts me up. It makes my heart happy. And I feel like it's happening. I feel like it's happening. I can feel that there's a gulf widening between, yeah, even as I say this, I just want to like distinguish what I'm describing from bypassing or abandoning or disconnecting from what is happening because, I am a practicing Buddhist. The Bodhisattva Vow means a lot to me. I'm not trying to abandon anyone. At the same time, I'm kind of like, the Titanic is going down. Are you going to get on a life raft? That's where I'm at.
Hi, I'm Rudy. Welcome to Voices of Emergence, where inner transformation meets systemic regeneration. How do we evolve beyond extractive systems? How do we meet a world in transition with soul, integrity, and imagination? Join us as we reclaim the wisdom of the body, embrace the paradox of being human, and step into a living story of emergence. I'm joined today by my dear friend and co-host Alex de Carvalho. What I like about Alex is he's a systems thinker, global connector, and always seeking the deeper patterns that shape our world. Together we dive into the emerging stories, questions, and possibilities of a world in transformation.
Thank you, Rudy, for the introduction. I'm Alex, and today we're joined by Schuyler Brown, a strategist, mystic, and cultural alchemist whose life spans the corporate towers of New York and the ancient hills of Kentucky. She's the founder of The Art of Emergence, a body of work that invites us to reimagine business, not as performance, but as a path of individuation, of healing, and of returning to the soul. Schuyler's voice carries a rare clarity and groundedness that cuts through illusion, honors complexity, and makes space for mystery. And I've experienced it myself over the years. Her journey is one of dismantling old definitions of success. She reclaims the sacred in everyday life, and she walks between worlds with radical integrity. Today we explore what happens when we treat work as a vessel for personal and collective evolution. How do we listen and truly listen for what wants to emerge beyond collapse? And how might magic, grief, and spiritual maturity help shape the new stories we're here to live? Let's begin and welcome Schuyler.
Thank you so much, Alex. Your introduction was so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Living in today's world can be very confounding. There's so much complexity. There's a meta crisis, and it seems like things are accelerating, and not just through the political dismantling that seems to be happening. It truly feels like a moment of collapse. And yet we feel that the seeds of the future have been planted. There is an emergence, and we love to give voice to that. And that would be my question to you is, when we say emergence, what stirs up for you in your body, your life? What does that convey or evoke?
I had a feeling you were going to ask that question. It's funny. I named my company, my organization, my platform, whatever you want to call it. I named it The Art of Emergence before COVID. So it was 2019. And it came to me in a flash, like in an intuition. As soon as it came, I knew it was the name for my next era, like what I was going to be doing. And it's funny, I was reflecting on it this morning. I remember looking at Fritjof Capra, I actually had to look up the definition of emergence in science and the living natural world. Like, what is emergence? I didn't even know. And I just offer that story because it feels very emergent. It's very emergent, like that's how it works, actually. It's this following of the aliveness in the moment. And for me, with subtle senses, like subtle sensing is a very, very important part of being in a state of emergence, or being able to follow emergence and what wants to emerge, and I think we often use that phrase, what wants to emerge, and I like it because there is an aspect of desire. There's a longing, there's an eros in emergence that is essential. As soon as you lose that longing, that thread of life, that eros, and we all know this feeling, you lose emergence. You lose the impulse of what's wanting to come through. I've spent the last 10 years now, or I guess it hasn't been that long. Wow. I'm curious if others are experiencing that. But yeah, it's been many years now that I've been dedicated to refining myself as a vessel and an interpreter or an instrument of emergence, and not just as an individual, but in groups. You mentioned collective presencing when we were speaking before, and these practices that are really built to refine our ability to co-sense and sense together. For me, emergence is that ability to individually and collectively sense the eros of the moment and the inspiration that's available to us and what wants to happen or emerge in that moment.
Beautiful, Schuyler, what you're expressing. I understood that you grew up in the countryside and then you made a corporate career in New York. I think we all have similar backgrounds. And but what I'm interested in is like, okay, what brought you here in the role that you are now? Like, what were the signs or the insights or the belief systems that you have to break through or let go of to actually move into this new role that you are now representing? And it's not something that we go to a retreat and we change, so it's a journey. But I'm interested in the cathartic moments, the signs, the insights, key moments.
Question. Ah, I'm standing here now. I mean, as you traced our journeys, I was kind of making an assumption that we might be around the same age. And I think there's something generational in that journey you described, from the country to the big city to the corporate world and then out the other side. If we're lucky, I count us among the lucky ones who have been, I don't know. Yeah, I'll just say it. Like, in the process of exiting the corporate world and paradigm, or have already done it. I did it many, many years ago now. So I feel so fully established outside of that paradigm that even when I want to, and trust me, there are moments when I'm looking at the bank account, or mostly that's the moment when I think, oh, maybe I should go back. Maybe I could just get a client or two. And it's like there's a moment of one of my teacher calls it irreversibility. There's a moment when we cross a threshold and there's no going back, So I crossed that threshold, and it doesn't mean, like I said, like I still have moments where it's hard. It's hard to forge a new path. It's hard to make a living in an emergent paradigm, one that I think you mentioned, transition, like we're not there yet. There's so many metaphors. Like, I really like the valley crossing metaphor. I do often feel like a hobbit on a journey, and like foraging for the food, like really trying to make the best use of the resources available. And, maybe we long for the Shire, it's like we long for that comfortability, or that comfort of the before times when maybe we didn't know. But yeah, I long ago crossed the threshold of irreversibility. So, like it or not, I have to keep moving forward, or plunging deeper, or whatever the movement is. Like, I have this personal mantra, which is stop worrying, start walking, keep walking. I tell myself that a lot. It's like I'll find myself ruminating, or it's funny you used the word strategist in your introduction, Alex, and I haven't considered myself a strategist in a long time, though I think that's a really important role in this transition. So, but there is a strategist in me who mostly now worries and ruminates. And that one I have to tell, stop worrying, start walking. And then sometimes we have to add the keep walking because I'll start walking and then I stop and ruminate and worry. Yeah, I mean, I had just to answer your question just slightly more specifically, like there were a series of teachers and experiences and awakenings that led me to this moment of irreversibility or this process of irreversibility. But I think, I don't know. If you're curious, I could mention some, but I think everybody has their own journey of, it's very individual, it's very personal how that unfolds.
I like your description of the Eros in Emergence. And on your Substack, you wrote a poem about the serpent. 5 years ago, I had a dream which was unforgettable. It's one of those dreams that you don't forget. In that dream, I dreamt of Shiva, and I was up to my neck in water, and here was Shiva towering over me, and he had the snake around his neck. And Shiva looked at me, flung the snake, and put it in the water, and the snake swam, a big snake swam right to me in my dream, and I woke up immediately. But I cannot forget that dream. It was so evocative to see such a figure, no matter what your religion or whatever you believe, to see such a figure in a dream is really arresting. It's like, oh, what was this all about? And so when you wrote your poem, The Serpent, it immediately brought back that dream. And it brought back, you talk about Shakti, and Shakti is this energy. In the Western world, we have this idea that it's the masculine that takes action and goes out and does. But with Shiva Shakti, Shiva is really like that holds a container, but Shakti is the energy. She is the creative one, the one that creates the world, right? And this is like an erotic engagement with life, with reality. She reveals and she conceals with her movement. And so I felt very resonant with your poem and your ideas around this. My question then to you is, what inherited beliefs about success, power, did you have to unlearn in order to create this new life?
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge your dream. It's so powerful. Yeah. I feel like you can't really mention Shiva and not acknowledge Shiva's presence. Boom. Oh, yeah. And I'm also I lit up because it's like to bring it like to thread, like to weave between the corporate background that we share and then this new life and this new world or career or whatever you want to call it. This is, in this moment, like being in a room where someone shares a dream as a piece of information, right? As a piece of data into the set, or as a, just because your heart felt it wanted to, or it felt relevant, like you were, we are right now following the Eros. And so like that to me is sane. That to me is the world I want to be living in, and I remember being in corporate spaces, especially in those transitional days for me where I was already having those dreams and having those intuitions and personal revelations as a result of a lot of work I was doing. I'm a big yogi, so Shiva and Shakti mean a lot to me too. But I was having those moments outside of work and then coming and spending 8-10 hours a day not talking about them, And I'm sure a lot of people can identify or relate to that experience. It's very sad, it's very stifling to the spirit. And then eventually, like, I exploded, I erupted. I couldn't hold it in anymore. And that was funny. Like, that was funny. And maybe other people have, like, it was like there were some moments that are quite funny in retrospect, though they felt really embarrassing or awkward or, like saying the wrong thing, or like I remember towards the end of my time in the corporate world, and I used to, my sensitivity was coming online, and there was this experience that would happen where people would cry, We would be in a meeting and it was often men, actually. And it was often men in the position of power. And whatever was happening in me, and then as a result in the field, it was evoking emotion, which is very taboo, or it was. I mean, I should say I haven't been in the corporate world for over a decade. So, I know a lot of things have changed and there are a lot of companies that are more progressive and doing a lot of work here. But at that time, yeah, the tears would start flowing. I actually had a partner, a woman at that time. We had a consultancy and she used to laugh. She'd be like, oh, we would leave the meeting. She'd be like, you did it again. And I'm like, I'm suffering, that emotion wants to move. And I'm just giving it the space, the permission to be present, to be here. And, so your dream, the snake, I think many, 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 how essential is the snake to our mythology here on Earth at this time, in this paradigm, the biblical references, the Eastern references, the Kundalini, and I think for me too, part of the mystical process and awakening was making the snake an ally and a friend. I mean, friend is putting it like, it's not quite that type of relationship, right? Unless you want to think of it as a spiritual friend, right? But, I grew up in a Christian context, let's say. My parents weren't practicing. We didn't really go to church. They were more hippies and a little agnostic at that point. But the context was Christian, and the story about Adam and Eve never made sense to me. And the vilification of the snake, really didn't make sense to me. I've always liked snakes and I find them to be beautiful and fascinating. And so, yeah, and how sacred, especially here on Earth, yeah. So the poem is meant to remind everybody of their own personal journey and relationship with the snake archetypally. And that is the nature of the Kundalini energy, which Ari and I both, Ari is my partner and collaborator in that piece and in many projects. We both believe and feel like that is the birthright of all human beings, is to awaken with that energy. And that we live in a secular culture that has largely, in the West anyway, forgotten how to initiate that process, how to hold people through that process. I don't know about y'all, but I've lost friends who were having Kundalini awakenings that were diagnosed as psychotic breaks or became psychotic breaks because they weren't held in a sacred context. I think in this new world that we're all really calling in, that is part of what will be happening, is that we're gonna help our young ones initiate, their own divinity through these processes. So that was the inspiration for that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did beautifully. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful. I'd like to elaborate a bit on the Shiva Shakti, masculine, feminine. I think we are in a huge wave of feminine energy that is needed also to basically bring the change, from that old masculine constructed world. And I believe what we are seeing now is a huge shadow in humanity, or from the masculine, that we haven't been able to deal with in the last decades or centuries. The masculine needs the feminine, needs that feminine energy also to regenerate or to come up with new ideas and new vision. So, but how do you, it has a lot to do with wounded masculine or wounded feminine. And then how do we see each other as, healthy masculine or mature masculine and feminine, and not as gender defined, but as energies. We all have a mother and father, and we all have these energies within, the one more defined than the other, but it's a dance. So, but I wanted to hear from you, how do you integrate these principles in your work, or how do you see that also in leadership? Is that changing? And how do you see it changing?
Yeah, you described it beautifully, Rudy, as energies we all hold, right? And I think maybe it's best to speak about something specific that I'm working on. And so, yeah, I was on the journey of the integration of the feminine and the masculine that was a very big part of my initiation and awakening. And it was inspired by pregnancy, becoming pregnant and having a child, going through the birthing process, and then also by a teacher that I had at that time. And yeah, it launched me, the awakening of the goddess launched me on this journey that I'd say I was fully dedicated to. Thank you for using the word alchemy, Alex. I really identify with the archetype of the alchemist. And yeah, I was totally dedicated to that exploration and process of integration in myself. And it manifested in events and a company dedicated to bringing the feminine principle into the workplace. Like for 5 or 6 years, I thought I was going to change the corporate world by bringing feminine principles in. And I learned a lot of lessons around that. And then I left and decided to do my own thing, and ultimately had to reintegrate my masculine, swung so far in the feminine. And emergence for me is a very feminine modality. And there was something else. Maybe it's the strategist. I talk about it as trust. So it's like I got really good at surrender, but I didn't trust. And for me, I'm not saying that this is universally true by any means, but for me, trust felt more like a masculine, a quality of leaning into. And I found when I started to look at my lack of trust that it went all the way back to the source. It was like God the Father was sitting there. And so I had to work out that relationship, that I had to the masculine and authority, my own father. So it's been like a very long process and journey internally. But just recently, last October, I convened a group of women. I had a command, an instruction come through, and the instruction was to gather the women. And when I got the command, I was like, no, 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 no. I've been gathering women for so many years. Like, I don't want to gather the women. I want to integrate the men. I want to be in integrated groups. I want to, I want to be beyond all of these ideas. And, you get a command like that, you can't ignore it. So I spent a couple of years working out what for. And ultimately last October convened a group of women to create an innovation pod. Basically, what came to me ultimately was that the future, if you want to call it that, maybe our higher selves, that there were these technologies and innovations that wanted to come through, and they needed to land, they needed to be collectively received. So I hand selected a group of women who, for me, one of the qualities that they all shared was an integration of the masculine. So there was a deep reverence and embodied experience of the feminine and the goddess in them. And then there was also a way that they had made peace with and integrated their own masculine. And so it is a group of women, what we're constantly doing as we're receiving these innovations and then actualizing them, raising money, building companies. One woman is building a company and we're supporting her in that process. So this meeting of heaven and earth, and then this actualizing into the world, we're constantly watching our process. When it tips too far into action without the relational or without feeling, or if it goes too far, like we'll find that maybe 3-4 sessions of our meetings, we haven't done anything. It's like, feels really good. Like we're working through a lot and our relationships are deepening, but nothing's happening, So that balance is our practice. And it's very avant-garde. It's very hard. It requires a lot of sensitivity. And I'm constantly surprised by how subtle this conditioning is and how deep it is in us. And honestly, I think that's what the organization of the future that all of us are going to be doing is working it out real time, not just like talking about it or working it out as a principle. I think what I see most often right now is that we swing back and forth. It's not actually integrated. We overcorrect. We're constantly like going too far and then overcorrecting. So maybe that pendulum swing starts to get, like maybe we finally find ourselves. And when we do that, we're also going to find new processes and new practices. That's what's really lighting me up right now, is being in a place of creation with a group of integrated people. That it's like very, very rare.
Yes, that is wonderful if it could be like that. And yet the workplaces we have experienced are not really like that. Especially in some of the larger companies, I experienced a lot of internal competition, politics, hierarchy, a lot of stress from deadlines, conflicting priorities. And it's just a high stakes, high pressure kind of environment. So can work become a place of healing rather than competition? Those workplaces are so structured and there's strategy, and yet we deal in the mystical, the mythological. Are there archetypes that can inform us? How do we create this newness?
Yes, we can, but it's going to require a lot of sacrifice, hospicing sacrifice. So I know what you're talking about. I can't even be in those environments anymore. One thing that I realized about Gather the Women was that the reason I had to start with women was because we had to work through the wounds of patriarchy and the way that women, like to get a group of 9 women collaborating in full trust and a full honoring of each other's gifts, like to really each woman be seen in her gifts and lifted up by the group, and to watch the power move through the group based on what we're doing and who holds that gift, like the center keeps shifting. It's constantly moving. To actually work ourselves to a place where get ourselves to a place where we can work that way, we had to work through a lot of the competitiveness, suspicion, like, there's a particular set of experiences that, a lot of women will come to groups of women and say, will admit like, wow, I've really had a hard time being in groups of women. I haven't felt safe. And so, yeah, this experience of being in a non-judgmental space for a woman with a bunch of women is really healing. And that's like job one, like we're in baby steps. Like we have to start with the ABCs, I think that's something that is like maybe harder. Like if you're newer on the journey, or you're in, how do I say this? Like the words I don't mean them to be, the words even are hierarchical, right? Like wherever you are is wonderful. But there is an ego and an arrogance, like I think Rudy asked earlier, like, what are some of the things you had to shed? What are some of the things you had to decondition? And this idea of success that is so essential in the corporate paradigm, or even in the current paradigm, like look at our leadership, that had to step out, like humility, right? Like the humbling that happens when you see that, oh, this is a whole new set of skills and I am a beginner. I got to start with the baby steps here. So yeah, and I also think for me, the way I'm holding this moment, I feel a bifurcation. I feel like an actual split, like a chasm opening up between those who are trusting, who are being pulled by the future. There's a big leap of faith. There's a lot of trust and a lot of surrender. And those who are capable of that are being pulled into this new paradigm, and those who aren't are, I don't know, there's like this schism, and all I know is I want to be on this side of the schism, I want to be in the better world our hearts know is possible. Charles Eisenstein sort of like gave it the best name that we have yet, the new earth. I'm definitely in the new earth school of thought. I know not everybody is, but it sustains me. It helps me make sense of what's happening. It gives me something to shoot for. It lifts me up. It makes my heart happy. And I feel like it's happening. I feel like it's happening. I can feel that there's a gulf widening between, yeah, even as I say this, I just want to like distinguish what I'm describing from bypassing or abandoning or disconnecting from what is happening, because, I am a practicing Buddhist. The Bodhisattva Vow means a lot to me. I'm not trying to abandon anyone. At the same time, I'm kind of like, the Titanic is going down. Are you going to get on a life raft? That's where I'm at. I hope that's not too dire, but that seems to be the situation.
Yeah, thank you. Very recognizable. So Rumi has this quote about beyond right and wrongdoing, there is a field, and I'll meet you there. And personally, it took me years to understand that, and I think that you actually can only understand it when you have grown out of that, judgment of like right and wrong, or we and them and us and the others. And so I think the danger is there constantly. We need to be aware of our own, bias of like, even on the left, on the right, there's so much of like putting the finger to the other, or they understood it, or they are not understanding it, or we are moving there and they are not, or I'm on a higher plane and they are not. So, which is separation, right? And duality. And I wanted to know or understand also, like, how do you in your work and in your communities, how do you stay coherent, and how do you stay true to your values, and, what is nourishing yourself? How do you stay self-aware of these dangers? Because I think we can be aware of them, but they are constantly there because it's our own conditioning, that's all the time trying to get us back into like, so how do you do that? So what are your rituals? What are your practices? Or
Yeah, it's a great question. And you begin to answer it by saying rituals and practices. The answer that came to me as you were speaking was the body. My body doesn't allow me to trespass against it. I think it's part of the irreversibility that I mentioned. I actually cannot. I cannot, because I'll have physical symptoms. I mean, it sounds maybe a little crazy, but like pushing beyond my capacity energetically, which is something that we did, or I did too, in the corporate world, and even post-corporate, I was doing spiritual work, but extracting the way we extract the resources from our precious earth, like extracting from my own body precious resources and then using them, burning them. Like I used to be able to do that. I can't do that anymore. If I'm going to create, it has to come from a place of being extremely well nourished and resourced. And I think that's because that's how it will be in the future. In this future place, in this paradigm that it's already here. That's the thing. Like I feel in it most of the time, is the honest truth. And I feel like my job, now that I'm in it, is to build bridges and extend the invitation back through art and through my words and through this transmission and just standing in it. And yeah, rituals and practices, like my body tells me what I can and cannot do, basically. And so I do have a very regular daily practice. Breath work, sitting, yoga, dance is essential to me. Swimming is very good. Being outdoors, I have a daily practice of making nature offerings and mandalas and speaking with the earth. And like sometimes I laugh at myself because like my schedule used to be I used to be a big list maker. I still make my list. I have lists here on my desk, I like a list, but my list now is like take a walk, make a mandala, call a friend, and write the poem, write the book. There's an appointment on the calendar, but it's like learning that balance, because if I push beyond, I will pay. And the work doesn't you can feel in the transmission of the work where it came from. So yeah, my body is my answer to that. And then I guess I would also say like communities of practice, peers, friends who keep you honest, being in a partnership with someone who's sharing your path. Like I know that that's a hard one for a lot of people when they begin to walk their path. They might be in a relationship or a marriage. I was, that wasn't like, we weren't really moving in the same direction. And at a certain point that didn't work for either of us, and we had an amicable split. But yeah, I think like being surrounded by others who are trying to do the same thing, right, is essential. I love it when my friends check me. It's the best. It's so good.
Something I've learned in my inner work, my shadow work, my parts work, is that, I cannot repress the shadow. I cannot tell the part to go away because it'll come back stronger. So I have to understand the part. I have to dialogue with it. I have to thank it, and I have to integrate it somehow so it starts helping me in new ways rather than my tired and worn patterns that no longer serve. I have to figure out new ways of being with those parts, unless they want to go off on their own, which they're welcome to. But you mentioned the Bodhisattva and spiritual bypassing. And, Rudy also mentioned that we have to meet people in that other field beyond right and wrong. And so I'm interested in how can we do that? And you mentioned Joshua Shray's The Emerald podcast, which is truly amazing. And it's an inspiration to me as well, because he brings words to something that we can aspire to. And so I think that's like a technology of helping humanity come to something new. And with Ari Kuschnir, your partner, you create these AI videos, which some of them become viral, and I think they're fantastic. So how do you see technology and AI? Do you see that as something that can help us find beauty, intimacy, a new relationship with each other and with the planet?
Yeah, I think it's like, oh wow. Yeah. So this is not there are like no platitudes here for me. This is not like, for me, this is also part of the spiritual mission. I actually got I was sitting with Ari oh my gosh. Well, Ari is a very special person and a very special case. He's like very gifted and kind of like made for this moment and this technology of AI. And I get a front row seat. I get to watch that. So even if I wanted to hate AI or ignore it or be afraid of it, I can't, because I'm living with someone for whom it's like watching someone at the control panel of a spaceship. It's it's an innovation, it's an evolution. And so I, as this was happening and he was spending more time with it, there was initially some resistance in me. I mean, I'm an embodiment like teacher, practitioner, guide. And so I had a lot of misgivings. I was worried, about all the right things. I think it's good to be worried. But we went to a film festival and we were sitting in the AI shorts show presentation. This was a couple of years ago. So AI was like was newer and very kind of gross. Like it couldn't really, represent things well. And anyway, I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. I got, because this is how it happens for me. I get pretty strong messages. And the message I got in that moment was, you have to deal with this shit. Like that. And I got physically in the theater, felt like I was going to throw up, like nausea, dread, full body, no. So again, with the body, but the body was like, I don't want to, but I realized like, oh, you have to deal with this shit. So I'm not sitting in technique. I'm not like, this is going to save us. And it can like, yeah, it can be a tool for beauty. Yes, it can. But I'm very realistic about the fact that we are fighting for our lives. Like this is something like the atomic technology that humanity has unleashed. And we got to quickly upskill and be good stewards of this thing. And that's Ari's view. Also, you know, early on, he was like, it's happening. And I want to show people that we can make something beautiful with it, that it can be a tool for healing. And I think like I get kind of emotional about it because I think he's doing like such a beautiful job and it's so brave and it takes a toll and it's a lot of work. So yeah, I feel this is the Bodhisattva vow, you know, you evoked that at the beginning of your question, Alex. Like I feel so much compassion for humanity that like a message like that, like you got to deal with this shit. I'm going to take very, very seriously.
Wow, thank you. Beautiful show. We're coming near the end of the show. So, as a last question, I wanted to ask you if you could name one illusion that most urgently needs to die, what would it be? And which illusion would you, not an illusion, or what seed would you plant instead of that illusion?
This one I have to tune in or think about if I really want to give you a good answer. There's so many. I think if I had to pick one in this moment, and of course they're interrelated, so it's really hard to extract one, you know, because it's like a whole, it's like systems thinkers will say, like the old system is internally coherent. So it's like these beliefs like all hang on each other, you know, they kind of reinforce and support a particular way of seeing. And I will say seeing because I think we're a little bit optically obsessed. We're obsessed with the visual world. It's like whatever illusion is in the way of in that moment. That's the answer. That's the one I would slice. You know, that's the one I want to take down because we're now full circle back to emergence in a way. It's like the Eros, you know, like I guess it's control, the illusion of control, and all of the systems we've put in place to keep ourselves feeling safe within this safe. And it's safe. And then my compassion is aroused again because it's scary. You know, reality can be overwhelming, frightening. It's very wild, but I do think that's what we have to reintegrate, brace. And anyone who's done psychedelics knows this. I think that's one of the great beauties of the psychedelic revolution is like each person who goes on that journey having an experience of the groundless nature of reality, the oneness, you know, it's like simultaneously like awesome and then also terrifying. So I would say control, the illusion of control and how it manifests from the most granular, the way we educate our children. Like I'm the mother of a teen and like she's in the school system, you know, it's like I'm constantly up against, you know, this like the arrogance and the hubris of the system and its idea that it has everything under control, which is quickly collapsing, you know. That's like one of the things that I actually see as a great potential benefit of this moment is the things that we thought were so solid are showing themselves also to be illusory, temporary, etc. So, and the seed I would plant would be to loop back to the Rumi, the heart. You know, like for me, that field beyond right doing and wrongdoing is the heart. So that is an essential instruction for where we're going. We're moving from the head to the heart, right? We're going to be living in a heart based, I mean, the words are insufficient. We will be living from and in the heart, field. And that is a place where polarities dissolve, resolve, can be held, both and. And yeah, so that's the seed I would plant, is living in and from the heart.
Schuyler, I think it's a beautiful ending. And often we forget that the most beautiful things are created within chaos, right? And we are entering a huge chaos now, but it's actually beautiful what is happening. If we can hold all that into our hearts and live from our hearts and from space of love, I think that's the way forward also. So thank you so much for your time. And Schuyler and Alex, a closing word maybe?
No, thank you so much, Schuyler. Like they say, the longest journey you can take is the one from your head to the heart. But this has been really, truly wonderful, Schuyler.